with that, let's get into demos and see what you've been building. Who wants to go first? Anybody? All right.
Yeah. Okay. This past week, our issue was just to, for when you're on the shopping list view, to click into the item, or click into the item and then see details of the item. And so we ended up deciding just to reuse the modal component that has been magically already built before. So you can see a demo here, click on myself. I guess I've been, and then the one thing we did was also some conditional rendering on like, if it's purchased more than once, then just do this. But if it's only previously purchased once, just list that. And then, last purchase, and then the next purchase interval. And then just a quick rundown of the code. And the item component, we just added the onClick method to the span for the item name, which then executes this function called handle modal change, which is just resetting setting the state of like show item to true. And then that is being used down here for conditionally rendering the modal component.
So is you said the onClick is just on the item name, not on that whole like block, like color block?
Yeah, it's only on the item name, but like, yeah, for now.
Well, I think that makes sense too, because there's a delete button and there's a checkbox. Like if you had it on the whole LI,
yeah, that sounds right.
You'd have to manage like the pointer events or something. So
cool. This looks great.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I said in the PR, but I love the fact that you handled the like 1 versus 2, like the plural case. Is there a case? I know, that was good. That's very thoughtful. Is it possible for it to be 0 though?
I don't think so.
When you add an item, does it automatically add a purchase?
Yeah, when you add an item, like the way that it works is like you add an item to the list as you're buying it for the first time. So there's always like a previous purchase.
It's different cohorts have done that differently. So
I know. I feel like I finally figured out how to explain the app well. And so I feel like from here on out, the app will be built in a similar manner that it was originally intended to be built. But for a while there, it was like really confusing and hard to explain. And so we kind of like shortcutted it by being like, it's just a regular shopping list. We're like, no, it's going to be a smart one, dang it. It's going to do all the work for you.
That's right.
So great work. That looks excellent. I think that one's ready to merge too, right? That one has been approved and is ready to go.
It was approved.
Cool. All right. Well, we can merge that one whenever you have time, and it'll be in production. And let's see what the other pair built this week.
All right. This will be interesting because Sajia did most of the work because I wasn't feeling well. So,
okay. You got
so this will be fun. Let's see. All right. So our issue was to make the welcome screen look pretty. So are you seeing both of my screens here? Okay. So we have a pretty welcome screen. All right, to do this, we decided to go with Tailwind because it didn't sound like people had a whole lot of strongly held opinions on what we used, except I want to learn something new. So since pretty much none of us had used this, we went with Tailwind, which involved a few install steps, and I'm going to run through them real quick just so people understand what's going on. But we used this tutorial, and it is linked in the pull request description.
Excellent.
I love that. Let's see. I really like, well, I'm going to let this play over here while I explain, because I think this is an excellent graphic for what Tailwind is.
Beautiful documentation.
It is. I love it.
So that's really cool.
I think a lot of us have used Bootstrap, or all of us have used Bootstrap. So we're used to just sort of plunking in a class name of button and getting something that looks like a button. Tailwind doesn't do that. Instead, we get to add lots and lots and lots of different class names. So, for example, we have widths, we have padding, flex, borders, all that fun stuff. We pull all of those in through our index in an assets main.css file, which looks like this. And I love this because we don't have to write any of it, but it looks really nice. It is actually formatted from the tailwind.css, generated from the tailwind.css file.
Okay.
And that all gets generated via post CSS, I think, if I'm following all this correctly. If anybody knows that I'm getting this wrong, please tell me.
That sounds right. I'm not 100% sure. That sounds right.
Okay. We need the post CSS because Tailwind by default doesn't auto prefix for browsers. So this inputs all of our browser prefixes and does some linting for us.
Interesting. Is that why? So I didn't follow up with what happened with all the formatting. What was going on with the package JSON?
Okay, so inside our package.json, what happened was that Thagia copied from over here and overwrote our formatting.
Okay. Got it.
And it also doesn't include the fun CI.
Right. That we need
that fix, yeah.
So what we did was we before we would have just had the React scripts start and the React scripts build, and now when we run start or build, it runs the post CSS so that we get our prefixes, we get our linting, we get all of our injected styles. And it pulls a lot of that from this tailwind.js file, which is also a config file and has so many things in it. It sort of generates some good default styles and a whole bunch of like standardized colors.
Is that a plugin that you have in your VS Code, or is that out of the box? Because that's amazing. Just to see the colors right there.
Oh no, I think that's one of my plugins.
That's super cool.
Really pretty.
I don't remember which one, but I'll look.
Color highlight. I think I see it.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm adding that right now.
It is. I really enjoy it because it makes finding things inside CSS easier, or even HTML. Any questions? I know that was sort of a lot.
That was really well done.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I had never seen Tailwind before, and it's kind of like, if I were going to use it, I would have to dig in a lot further, because I'm like, wait a minute, all these are now class names. What does that actually look like? How does that affect performance, that it now has to look for a class name for each of those styles? How do you customize styles on top of that? I have so many questions.
Yeah, no, there are so many things you can do with this. I've had fun playing with it. You can actually extract it all into, so you can get your button and button blue classes back if you want to. They allow that extraction to happen.
Oh, I see. So it looks like you're referencing apply and you're referencing other class names. So you can actually kind of coalesce those down into something that's more semantic or readable or something.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I feel like you have to pay a lot of attention to the cascade here. Yeah. If you were.
Maybe they did.
Yeah, I don't know if I
haven't. But if you want to just plug in styles out of the box, but I'm really curious how it would work if you needed a lot of customization, if it would be worth it or not. Because I feel like they could start to get messy looking, if you tried blending them too much. Wait, where are the styles coming from and what do they look like?
I feel like my instinct would be to go through and sort of build components, like base components to use that included all my styling, but I don't know if that,
Yeah. It seems like this does a lot. Like you could just create like a really beautiful app just using Tailwind probably.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
That demo's so cool. I just that little graphic.
I know.
I want to take that back to work and show Mel, our designer, because
yeah,
it's really nice.
it's amazing. Excellent work. Okay, let's see the app in action. I'm curious to see it.
Is this one merged as well? Is this one already merged?
This is not merged.
Okay.
So
Looking good.
And then she used a modal. That being said, I know we're trying to schedule a meeting tomorrow to actually discuss colors and styles and that sort of thing. So I think this was everything's set up now for us.
Great. Yeah, that's great. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think it was in Slack or the PR or something. I'm like, minimalistic is totally fine. Like, don't feel pressure to make this some like big, intense, like super incredible animated thing. Like, simple is great as long as it's like accessible. I wanted it to be mobile friendly. I think Shajia maybe pushed some changes. Can you show us what it looks like in mobile?
Yeah.
And I thought it was an interesting choice that like on desktop, oh, that looks so good. That looks much better. I love it. I love the little teal bar at the bottom. I had, what was I gonna say? I don't remember. This is great. Oh, I thought it was an interesting choice that on desktop, it's like, looks kind of like a page. Like there's an extra sort of like div with some box shadowing and stuff going on. Because I was like, what am I looking at here? Is this like part of the styling or whatever? And at first I was like, that's an interesting choice. But I thought, oh, it's actually kind of cool because on desktop, it almost feels like a list, like a shopping list, like a piece of paper or something. So I thought that was cool. But I was curious. But I think Shajia did that.
Yeah, Shajia did all of the styling here, so I'm sort of like...
Yeah, I was curious if she like had some kind of like inspiration she was looking at or something, because I think that could be a really good way to go about, if you're having to style your own app or something. Like find another app that you really like admire. And
I like I like to play around on Dribble.
Oh, I love Dribble.
So, and look for things like login. Yeah. So.
Oh, that's such a good idea. Yeah. You should post that in the channel so that people know about Dribble.
Will do.
My partner used to work at Dribble.
Oh, really?
Oh, really? Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Was there anything else?
This is amazing. Great work, Shajia, if you're watching. Yay! Great, Allie. So good. And I love that design.
Back here. How do I stop?
There should be a little bar with a little red button in the...
It's hidden. You sometimes
there it is. I got it.
There it is. Good job.
Such good work on week 7, y'all. Amazing. Are you ready for week 8? Please say no. I want you to get that bio. Yeah, I'm kidding. It's been a beautiful journey, and I cannot wait to see how this comes together to the final product. It's been like an incredible experience to see so many different cohorts come up with such wildly different apps, and not just in their styling, but in like the code itself. Like you can't find 2 apps that look the same in the code at all. Like they're all very, very, very different. And it's very inspiring and very eye-opening to the fact that coding can be done so many different ways. And it's beautiful, and I love it, and I love you all. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew for a presentation on accessibility.
Oh, snap. All right. I'm going to do a portion of my screen because I'm going to have 2 windows up.
I already love what's happening here.
Yeah? Cool. Great. So, yeah, Zoom UI. Okay.
I love the domino hold up. That's what I love.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that. So, all right. So we're going to talk about accessibility, and this is one of my favorite topics. It's probably accessibility, performance, and then mobile web are the 3 things that I'm most passionate about in web development. So we're going to talk about sort of the what, the why, and the how of accessibility. It's something you may have covered in boot camps and stuff. Is this a topic that how familiar are you with it? Not very. Seeing some shaking heads.
Fairly familiar, but boot camp certainly didn't cover it.
Me either. Boot camp didn't cover it.
Yeah.
Andrew had to cover it for me.
All right. So, Allie, you can check me on stuff. Adrienne, Stacy. But yeah. Anyway, hopefully it'll be helpful. So the first thing just to get out of the way is you often see hashtag A11Y, as these are not L's, they're ones. And the reason for that is that there are 11 characters between the A and the Y. So it's literally A11Y. So if you see that hashtag, it's not ally, it's accessibility, just with all these letters replaced by a number. Just, in case you didn't know. So with that out of the way, I'll use this accessibility sort of short form throughout the rest of the thing. So, all right, so the what of it. So the Wikipedia definition. So web accessibility is an inclusive practice of ensuring there are no barriers to prevent interaction with access to websites on the World Wide Web. I feel like World Wide Web is just not how we say it anymore, but by people with physical disabilities, situational disabilities, we'll talk about what that means, and socioeconomic restrictions on bandwidth and speed. So a lot of times we think about somebody's blind, they're using a screen reader or something, but there are actually a bunch of other cases, and we'll talk about that more. When a site is correctly designed, developed, and edited, generally all users have equal access to information and functionality. So, there's nothing that you can't get to or you can't access, no matter sort of what your situation, disability, or other restrictions. So the W3C, so the standards body for the web, the World Wide Web Consortium, they have a working group dedicated to accessibility, and they publish standards in the US, Section 508 of the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? Is that right? I think that's right. Requires government agencies to make websites accessible to people with disabilities. And that same standard is starting to be applied to private businesses as well, which is why Domino's is up here. So we'll cover that in a bit. So a little bit more about the what. So some people with disabilities access websites using what are called assistive technologies. So that's screen readers, screen magnifiers, speech to text kind of input, assistive keyboards. So there's literally some people they're quadriplegics who literally navigate the web with a little joystick that they move with their chin. So the next time you build some fancy interaction on your page, consider the person who's navigating with their chin, right? And then Braille displays as well. So there are literally little machines that will, as it goes through the page, it's not reading it out loud. It's literally creating Braille on the fly based on the text on the page. So lots of different ways that people access web pages. It's not just looking at it and reading it, right? Popular screen readers include NVDA and JAWS on Windows. NVDA is free, so it's the most popular one. JAWS is pretty similar, a little more powerful maybe, but it's costs an arm and a leg. And then VoiceOver is built into Mac OS. So one thing to note about those, so NVDA and JAWS, like I said, work pretty similarly. They have a slightly different paradigm to how VoiceOver works. And so a common kind of pitfall for developers is that a lot of us work on Macs, like our work will give us a Mac to work on. And so the default is just to go to VoiceOver and oh yeah, it seems to work in VoiceOver. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work in NVDA or JAWS, because they treat things they group things differently and some stuff like that. So anyway, it's good to know that there's a difference. There is actually a tool by a former Zappian who, Weston Thayer. Is he still a Zappian? Maybe he's still a Zappian. Anyway, but he actually came up with a system sort of like BrowserStack. Like BrowserStack, you can go and use any browser on any platform and it'll kind of render in a window. He's made the same thing for NVDA, JAWS, and VoiceOver. So you can actually use that service to test across the different screen reader platforms. So anyway, there's a difference. I guess that's all to say that, as a developer, just kind of getting on there and going through it in VoiceOver really quick isn't necessarily sufficient. All right, why do we care? Why do we pay attention to this? So, I mean, hopefully it appeals to all of you that it's just the right thing to do to provide equitable access to information. I think, we all want as many people as possible to be able to access, the things that we're building. As a business, you may be legally obligated to make your website accessible. Again, that's why Domino's is up in that other tab. And if you're thinking about sort of your addressable market for a business or product, more people in the US access websites with assistive technology than everybody who lives in Canada. So it's not a small group. Some will say that 20% of web visitors have some sort of disability. I mean, I know like if I had my glasses off, it wouldn't matter how big I bumped the font up. But anyway, making your pages accessible for people with disabilities also makes them more accessible for everyone. So that's the kind of curb cut example that it's often used. You get to the edge of a curb at an intersection or something, and there's a curb cut, and it's there, for people in a wheelchair. But also, I mean, most of us probably gravitate towards that curb cut because it's just easier for us too. And if you do things like you make it so you can tab to every element on your page, your power users of your website who want to fly through there with their keyboard will also be happier, right? So that's a bit about the why. So I talked about sort of situational disabilities and things too. So this is actually a graphic from Microsoft. Microsoft has done some amazing work recently around accessibility in the last few years. So they have this kind of broken down into permanent, temporary, and situational disabilities, and then across some of the senses. So permanent disability related to touch might be that someone, maybe they were born with one arm, right? So they don't have the ability to use two hands to do something. So if you were building a tool in the physical world or something, you want to make sure that it's safe, you could safely operate it with one hand. A temporary version of that is somebody might, they might break their wrist or something. Like they'll be fine 6 or 8 weeks from now, but right now they only have the use of one hand. And then situational is you might be a new parent and you got, this lump over here in one arm and you have to do everything with one hand, right? So, so there are all these kind of disabilities that, that may come and go for some people but are permanent for others. And we kind of, that's another example, I guess, of where if we build things for the people who are in that permanent category, it's going to help the people in the temporary and situational categories as well. The sight one, they actually, well, cataracts, I guess, kind of addresses it. But, tons of people my age, I mean, I'm 52. So tons of people my age, like our sight starts to decline. Like, that's a reason there's that, like, kind of you bump the font up on your iPhone kind of thing. That's one that most of us will encounter at some point in our lives. So, yeah. Anyway, I feel like I'm flying through this. Any questions yet?
This is really cool. I've never seen it before.
Oh, the graphic, yeah.
This graph is like one of my favorites because I feel like when a lot of developers who haven't experienced like a disability that we like commonly think of as being a disability that would require an assistive technology, once they realize that they maybe have in fact experienced some kind of situational disability, I feel like it brings you closer to the issue and makes you more aware and makes you more like eager to make changes in your apps and eager to pay attention to those kinds of things. So I love like showing this kind of thing.
Yeah, me too. All right, let's talk about some how. So this isn't, the end all be all of everything you do, but it's a good start. So if you follow these practices, you'll be better off. You'll be pretty far along in making your stuff accessible. So using valid semantic HTML. So this is timely because we just had a thing come up in a PR where we were doing things in a way where it was actually rendering invalid HTML. Most browsers are pretty forgiving of that kind of thing, but it's better to, it's just easier on the software. You're less likely to come up to, against some edge case or something if your HTML is valid. Does everybody know what I mean by semantic HTML? Is that a concept that you're all familiar with? So the concept of using the right, a tag that like kind of connotes like the right meaning to the content. So, there's lots of like figure as like an example of a container for like a graph with a caption or something. Tables are actually semantic for tabular data, right? Like tables catch a lot of grief these days, but that's what they were designed for, and they're great for that use. Headers are super important in this world. So yeah, semantic HTML, that's whole topic. A very basic thing that you should always do is include alt attributes on your image tags. So the alt attribute doesn't necessarily need to contain anything, and in some cases it's actually better if it doesn't, if it's just an empty string. But the alt attribute should always be there, because if it's not, a screen reader is going to come up to that image and it's going to I mean, what it used to do is, you know, square bracket image, a square bracket. And that's what would get read to the person. And they're like, oh, great. Like, not only did they, like, is there an image I can't see? It's like, they didn't even provide me any information about what it is. But if you leave an empty string, the screen reader will just skip right over it. And that's actually appropriate for something that's just sort of, you know, presentational. If it's not trying to convey any important information to the user, it's actually better just to have the screen reader skip over it. But anywhere that you're using an image to, you know, convey, anyway, anything that the user should kind of pay attention to, it should have an alt attribute that has the correct text in it.
So if it's like a Dev2 article or something, and it's just a random unsplash picture that provides no real meaning, would you just leave it empty?
I would,
like
yeah. If it's like the hero image or something, unless there's something about the hero image. If you know, that's like,
I mean,
you're trying to set up, like trying to set up a mood for the post or something. Like maybe you could.
If the hero image contains context that is important to whatever the text is, you should include text, but otherwise skip it, if my understanding is correct.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah.
I feel a lot of pressure to always include it, so that was a good reminder.
The attribute should always be there, but yeah, it can be. I mean, I've done this one PRs at work too. Is like, actually, let's take that text out because it's just repeating something, like the text is right next to the little icon or something. So let's just leave it out of the icon, right?
And like, will it say, like when the screen reader's reading it, will it say like whatever the string is and then image or something? Will it include that it's an image? Like image.
I believe
string, right?
I believe so. I'm not, Allie, do you know off the top of your head?
I know that when you no, I actually don't know. I when I try to add image text that includes like this is an image of, a lot of times my linters and stuff will say don't include the word image, but I don't know. I haven't done a whole lot of research on that one.
That's honestly why I asked, because I think it may have even been you, Andrew, where I was doing like alt text somewhere where I was like, person's name, headshot or something, and headshot got removed. And so it's like, oh, is it not necessary to say like that this is like an image of a person, like, because it's implied somehow by a screen reader.
Well, we can fire
has, like,
voiceover.
Image, Stacey Taylor. You know?
Yeah, I think it's something. Yeah, I think so. Shoot, I should know that actually, but we could also just try it out. So maybe we'll do that. All right, so just checking the chat. So the next how is to use ARIA attributes if necessary. So I have a little quote up here. The best ARIA is no ARIA at all. We need to use semantic HTML whenever possible. So ARIA attributes they get a little overused. They're a little bit of a crutch. So a lot of times what will happen is you kind of build a bunch of things with divs and then like, oh yeah, it's not accessible, and go back and add ARIA attributes. Well, I mean, it's better than not doing it, but if there are semantic tags that can kind of produce the same effect, it's better to do that. So a really good example of this is at work, not my current team, my previous team. We built this page that had little headers and then a little arrow, and you'd click on the arrow and it would drop down and show you more information for these three kind of buckets. And the first implementation was all custom, like divs and stuff and a bunch of JavaScript and all these kinds of things. And we actually got on a call with Fable Tech Labs, who I'll talk about in a minute, who had, they do manual accessibility testing. Their tester got to that part of the screen and he was like, there's nothing here for me. I can't actually interact with this thing. What is it? And we were like, oh no, and he said to us, what you should probably do here instead is use the details element. So it turns out that there's an HTML element that does all that for you, And because it's built into the browser, it has all the accessibility stuff built into it. So we replaced our custom implementation with a details element, just styled it up. And then when we came back and reviewed it with him again, he was able to go through the whole thing, tab through all of the bits of information. So where we tried to like recreate this thing, and this happens a lot with select lists too. Like a designer will say, oh, I want this custom select list. I want it to look this way and stuff. But there's a ton, that is a minefield of accessibility problems. And it is possible to recreate it all with ARIA attributes, but if you haven't done it before, you're going to be there for weeks doing that because there's so many edge cases and all this stuff. So better to use a semantic element if you can over ARIA attributes. But if you literally can't, if there's no element that does the thing, ARIA attributes will help. So ensure all content is reachable via keyboard. So again, this is the thing about be able to tab through the page and kind of see all the elements, have the screen reader identify everything. Kind of blanking on like what the cases are where that wouldn't be the case, but it's definitely possible to have content that won't get read. If anybody can think of a case off the top of their head, I'll pause for a second.
I don't know, sometimes React just gets weird and doesn't let me tab to things, so.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. And then ensuring the content and tab ordering makes sense. So, this is, with CSS, you're able, and grid and different things, like you're able to move things around all over the page, right? So but a screen reader isn't going to respect that. It's going to literally, it's reading the HTML. A screen reader doesn't even care about the CSS. So it's going to literally read things in the order that the HTML is like comes in the file. I mean, across the wire. So what that means is that, I mean, a good way to kind of ensure that this does make sense is to look at your page with all the CSS turned off. And if it actually kind of makes sense linearly like that, then you're probably in pretty good shape. And then you apply the CSS back in and, move stuff around and on mobile, change the order, all that kind of stuff. And tab ordering, that's something I'll show you in a second. So using sufficient color contrast, spoiler alert, this is where the Domino site does the worst, but this is a super common thing too, where you have, dark gray text on a light gray background, and that's almost never a good idea. I mean, like we try to pay attention to the stuff at Zapier, and we still have a couple places where, text on a button, like the color contrast isn't quite up to spec. So it's really easy to fall into that. And it's actually a pretty easy thing to identify and fix. So, and the other thing is
not to identify and fix, but it's really challenging to like, if you have a certain color palette in mind that you like, to find something that will work within it. Sometimes it's easier to change like the point of your font in your design to like get to the next group of like, oh, this is large text now or something. Cause it's like, but all of these color combos look terrible. So it can be hard to like find what you want and also have it be accessible, but it's worth it because you want everybody to be able to use your stuff.
True that. And then the last one, just don't use only color to signify state. So, we have, as an example, we have the, our list is kind of sorted into things with different colors, but one of the AC there was to add a label that would identify, what state the item was in too, so that when you go through with a screen reader, it's kind of getting read to the person. The thing that we aren't necessarily covering there in that AC is people who are colorblind. So red-green color blindness is the most common, and so if we're using red and green as states, like those are both going to look like shades of gray to somebody with that particular type of color blindness. So we should probably actually add that in the AC, and maybe provide a link to one of the checkers, like one of the things that shows you, like you can actually preview your stuff with as if you have that type of, like different types of color blindness. So
oh yeah, I love that. I think like in general, like when you're dealing with accessibility and UX, try to never just have one indicator of any kind of state. It's like there's things that we deal with all the time. Like remember when we first started using chips in our credit cards and the response from the readers was And like, if you weren't looking, if you were like holding your kid or something and you look down and there's no message and it just yelled at you, you're like, oh, it got declined, right? Like I did something bad. And so it's like, it needs to like have multiple kind of like, okay, also tell me and light up green and say, you know, whatever. But in general, never just one.
That's a really great example because, that was really jarring there for a while.
It was so jarring.
They very quickly fixed it because I'm sure everyone has had the same reaction. Like, what the crap?
It's decline, and then you like earn this panic and just anxiety. It's terrible. So let's not induce anxiety with our designs, y'all. Make people feel good.
Cool. All right. The other how. So these things are all a great starting point. If you do these things, you're going to be in good shape. But there are ways to test that that your end product is accessible. So there are automated tools such as Axe, which is a really good start. And it's something that, like, we build that into our CI/CD at work, so that we get a report every week, I think, of how many Axe violations across certain parts of our work. So it's really good, but it only finds about 30% of the issues. So it's better than not doing it for sure, because it catches all the stuff, because it's automated software, right? Like it catches all the stuff that is that it can find through the sort of static analysis. So if an alt attribute is missing, like it shows up as a violation. But what it can't do is tell you, okay, yes, great, there's an alt attribute. It can't tell you whether or not that should have text or what the text should be, right? That's still something that a human has to do. So anyway, it's good. It's like, it's a baseline. You should definitely have it, but it just realize that it does have limitations. So guided audits. So that's what we're going to do with the Domino site here in a second. So my favorite tool for this is called Accessibility Insights, and it's a little kind of Chrome extension that you can get. It's by Microsoft, and it's super well done. And if you were to go through the entire guided audit for a couple of sites, at that point you're gonna know 10 times more than you do now about accessibility in general. It links off to tutorials and does all kinds of stuff. It's really amazing. And then I mentioned Fable Tech Labs earlier. So they're not the only company that does this, but I've worked directly with them, so I can kind of vouch for them. But they have accessibility testers. So these people are, actual screen reader users. The guy Sam that worked with us, he'd been using a screen reader for 20 years. So for him, whereas I might go in once in a while with VoiceOver and look at something, that's how he gets around on the web. He has like this giant sample of all the websites he's seen, and that he can kind of tell us what works for him and what doesn't. He's just one person, but he's been using it for a long time. He's very familiar with the tools and what their limitations are, how the different types of screen readers work, all that stuff. So it was so impactful for my engineers to get on a couple of calls with Sam and have him get to a point and just be like, I can't even see this thing. And they're just like, no, like this, I don't know. Anytime you encounter an actual user trying to use your thing, especially, we all think of ourselves as being kind of accessibility advocates and stuff. And then you realize something you built like just doesn't work or is super confusing, and just like, oh crap, I want to go back and fix that. So that's like the kind of gold standard. I mean, again, if you do these things and you have the automated stuff and you go through it on your own, you're in a better place than 80% of websites out there. If you can convince the company you work for to pay for Fable Tech Labs to also look at it, you can get to that. You can get that last, maybe 15 of that last 20% or something. It's really hard to catch everything, and it's kind of a journey to take a complex site all the way to being fully accessible. But every little thing you do makes it a little, kind of enlarges the number of people that have access to your information. Whew. Okay, so that's all the expository part of this. Any questions before I do a demo? I'm going to do a demo of Accessibility Insights. Cool. All right. Demo time. Okay, so the reason I'm picking on Domino's, they got sued because their website wasn't accessible. And they decided to fight it in court instead of just fixing the problems. And some people estimate that it would have cost them about $20,000 to fix the problem. That's not chump change, right? but it probably cost them like $200,000 to fight it in court. So why didn't they just do that? And I have theories about that I won't go into. But anyway, they decided to, like, the hill they were going to die on was like fighting, except like making it so like making it so their website isn't accessible to people with disabilities. Like, it just doesn't make any sense, right? So anyway, that's why we get to pick on them today, because they deserve it. But anyway, what we're going to do is I'm just going to take the little extension up here and I'm going to click on it. Whoops. Yep. I'm going to click on it, right. And it pops this little thing up. So Accessibility Insights has kind of 3 options. So it basically, so you can see it down here. It's actually powered by Axe, the tool that I was just talking about. There's this FastPass thing, which is a great way to get like kind of a summary of any accessibility problems on a page. It has a more in-depth assessment mode. So you actually go through, and I'll show you that as well, but you go through kind of each thing that the FastPass looks at, and you can kind of run pieces independently and kind of get more information. And then it has this kind of ad hoc mode where you pick and choose which of those many things you want it to run. So we'll start off by just doing FastPass. So this is why I needed to share more of my screen. So it basically, just when you click on it, we're in FastPass mode up here. It just goes through and it finds problems, and you see there's 26 like violations of rules. They're all color contrast. So we open that up and we get a link to find out more about color contrast, more about the kind of WCAG. So I didn't mention WCAG, but that's the accessibility working groups. That's their kind of a moniker or whatever. Anyway, this is a link to the spec that talks about color contrast. And then it goes through and it shows you for each of the violations what the actual problem is. So they have a background color that's this, the foreground color, the text color is this kind of dark gray, and they have the background color is a light gray. So you notice it's like, we don't see anything here, but we scroll down, aha, look at that. So it has each of those violations kind of circled in red, and you click on the little information icon there, and it tells you more about what the actual rule is that got violated. I'm going to open up and inspect the page, and then actually I'll take it out of responsive mode so it's a little bigger. Anyway, and then you can actually just click that to inspect the HTML where the problem is. So so it'll actually take you to that element, so you don't have to, like, hunt around for it or whatever. But it'll tell you. So you can see that there's this underlying class, and you should be able to see where the fonts are, or the color they're declared and everything. So so that's FastPass mode. Very useful, very fast. It has this other feature which is called tab stops, which is kind of fun. So I'm just going to tap it here first. So you turn on the tab stops thing, and then you literally start tabbing around the page. So I'm just hitting the tab key repeatedly, and it will show you the order that things will, like, kind of gain focus as you tab around. So I don't know what that's about, but going way up there, I think that may just because it's scrolled off screen. But if we go through, it actually looks like stuff is in a pretty reasonable order. Except for this thing. Why is, where I can't get to it, there. Like, finally you get down to the little chat help thing about your order or whatever, and it's the very last thing. Like, in order to get to that, like, say if you were on a screen reader and you knew that that's the thing you wanted, you would have to tab 55 times to get to that. So maybe that's something that you could consider, moving that up in the tab order above all this legalese that you probably don't care about, right? All right, so that was FastPass. So actually I'm gonna go into assessment mode here, and you can see that there are these 24 categories of things that, this is actually what FastPass is kind of checking in the background. So there's automated checks, so color contrast again, so we can kind of again, kind of get more information about the different things. Keyboard navigation, so we can do kind of the visual helper for that. Again, that's the tabbing through stuff. Focus. So again, kind of what elements can take focus. Anyway, so there's landmarks is actually a super important one. So a lot of the screen readers, they organize things into, it's like headers and landmarks are kind of the two big navigational, like top level navigational elements. So, so a landmark should have a role and a bunch of things. Anyway, there's, as you can see, there's just a ton of information here. If you go through this and you really kind of try to digest all this, you're going to come out of it with a really good understanding of accessibility generally. So we're running out of time, so I'll cut it short, but is that helpful to see that?
Yeah, that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
That was super, super cool.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love that tool so much. And I think that like, if any of you are interested in contributing to open source, this can be a really good foot in the door where you just go to these open source tools, run this exact same extension on them. And the information that is provided to you from this tool, from WCAG, provides you with like a really beautiful description for why these things need to happen for your PR description, and can help you learn a lot and contribute in a way that is beneficial to humans, which is cool. So it's not just like adding a new feature, it's like making this baseline so that everybody can use it. And that is very important. So it can be a good way to get started if you want to do that. Beautiful presentation.
Thanks. Yeah, that last page has a bunch of resources, links to the stuff that I referenced. So I'll post the slides in the channel. All right.
I love it. Okay, let's see. Last week, let me pop into our, okay, let me share my screen. I realized I didn't finish that sentence at all, but you know where I was going. Okay, share. So it looks like we have 2 issues here that are review in progress. Let's see, the details of the purchase has been approved, right, by everybody and is ready to be merged. So I'm going to drop this here. I'll let you move it over once you merge it. And the pretty screen has it gotten the final approval? Yeah, Allie, do you know?
I don't believe so. I know you had left a comment about,
I think it was just waiting for the mobile view, and that looked good when you demoed it. So I'll take a final look after my next call and then send through that final approval and move that over. But it looks like next week we are dealing with making the shopping list screen look pretty, making the items detail screen look pretty, and adding an item and add item screen look pretty. So it's a bunch of styling, and we do this, we leave all the styling till last, because what we found is in the past, when cohorts start styling a little too early, it just takes a lot of backtracking and cleanup again. So we stored it all up so that you can go in and make this thing look pretty. And you guys did a great job getting Tailwind set up. So I hope that becomes useful to you next week. But what we did with the last cohort that ran this is we were in the same situation where there were 3 issues left in the end. And instead of divvying those out to the different pairs, we asked if everybody kind of wanted to like mob program on these as a team. And when it, like after you mob program and come up with like a certain style that you're all comfortable in agreement about, and you detailed that really well, if you want to break it out and like give people certain responsibilities, you can. So I kind of wanted to get your feedback and thoughts on how you all thought that you would get the most out of doing these styling issues. Do you want to keep split up and just tackle 2 of them, and if somebody gets done, take on the 3rd one? Or do you kind of want to all work cohesively as one big group? What do you think?
It sounds like we're planning on getting together tomorrow anyway to talk about colors and just sort of general style guidelines.
Yeah, what I think would be cool.
Thoughts? Sorry, Stacey.
No, you're fine. I want to see what everybody else thinks too. What I think would be cool is because like when you pick a style for a certain element, it's likely it's going to be used across the other pages as well. So if you could if you wanted to get together on Monday, like you were talking about, and kind of agree on a theme, and then just kind of spend time mob programming as a whole group to see like how to use Tailwind and like what like the class names are for the things you want to use. Then it's going to make the other two issues that you do next so much easier, because it's very likely you're going to use the exact same class names on the different elements that you need. So you're like, all right, we've got, say you take on number 15 as a group and you've got the shopping list screen looking good. Well, then if you say, okay, so Luca and partner is going to take this and whoever else is going to take this, then you can basically pop into that code that you just pushed up and just grab those class names that you'd already used. And it should make things a little bit smoother and make the styling on the app a little more cohesive because you've already selected the class names that you want to use. Does that sound interesting?
I think that makes sense.
Good. You all have worked so cohesively as a team already that I don't worry about you at all. But I wanted to make sure you had like buy-in if you were like, no, I really want to do like the item details page, like when Joan's going to do that one. If not, I can't see why you shouldn't work as one big whole beautiful team.
Your last week together. It's kind of a good way to bring it all together.
It is like a whole virtual hug, and I love it. Good then? Good with that? Yeah. Any nays? Okay, cool. So what we'll do is I am going to leave these here. And when you meet on Monday, I'm going to let you go in and leave the notes that you need. And I'll check back in at the end of Monday to see, like, is everything going okay? Do you have a plan to get all 3 of these tickets done by the end of the day? But this is where collaboration is really going to come into play to make sure that you're ready to go and you've got things organized and documented in a way that the entire team, including me and Adrienne and Andrew, can kind of see what kind of progress is happening. And you're the team. You're the whole team. Is this good? Feeling good about it? You all can do it because you've been brilliant. And I have no doubt that you're going to do amazing things. Sound all right? Any questions? Like when you're thinking about like the process of agreeing on a design or implementing some designs with Tailwind or without Tailwind, is there anything that kind of concerns you or that you're not quite sure how to do best? Or anything about like how to make sure it's successful based on what we learned in Andrew's module today? You're feeling pretty confident about getting that rolled out?
I think the only styling thing I noticed sometime, like when we were working on this project, was we like split out our styles into different CSS files for every component. And then like maybe in those, maybe said like button should be this one style. And then I kind of like overrode the buttons for all the other ones because like cascading, I think. So I don't know if you have any suggestions on like how to avoid that, or is it just kind of making sure everything has a class name to it?
Andrew is the cascade master. What do you think, Andrew?
Well, I mean, the good thing about that is that then all the buttons would be consistent around the app, right? So, yeah, what I would suggest is like you come up with a button style. Maybe there's a couple of states, there's like the primary button, secondary button, there's like an active state, whatever. But then make sure that all the HTML around the app matches and has the right class name so that they all look consistent across the app. So I think in the early stages of it, when you're just styling a one-off button and then like you see that it actually doesn't, like it kind of messes up a button in another place. That's super common. But yeah, with a little coordination, you can get, just get the app kind of looking consistent.
So you think like this is the progress or the process that I would have in mind for something like that? Kind of like Andrew was saying, when you're styling one button, you just style the button right then and there where the button is. And then when you notice that it messes up another one, extract those class names into a new like single class name. Is that what you would do? And then you can apply that single class name to all of the buttons that need it. And then you have one button across the whole thing.
Yeah, that Tailwind feature where you could actually apply and you like string all the styles together that you want for a button, and then you just have a button style. I mean, it's like that's a really cool feature.
Yeah. So in that case, you would have like one probably unique file that has your kind of like composed styles, your extracted styles, like I don't know, global styles, you might call it, something like that. where you can just apply them wherever you need them, import them and apply them. Does that answer your question, Lily?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks.
Cool.
Cool.
All right, we're about to have a bunch of mentors join for orientation, so.
We're here for you. I've never used Tailwind, but I'm happy to dig in if you guys come across weirdsies. Here for you.
It looks cool. It looks super cool.
Yep.
Yes, amazing work this week. And I'm going to leave this to you. Let us know if you have questions, okay?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Happy
Bye,
week
everyone.
8.
Bye. Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
All right.